Recorded at WMEB Studios at the University of Maine, it's time for All Three Phases.
Quick throw for Julian, setting up a screen. He's going to look to throw downfield. Amendola wide open. Makes the catch at the 18 in stride. He's gone! Touchdown! Patriots! What a play call!
Welcome back to All Three Phases, Episode 2, beginning here this afternoon, Monday, March 23rd, 2015. And some breaking news coming through as we start this recording. According to Christopher Price, a bunch of Patriots already back at Gillette Stadium, and two of them being Brady and McCourty. So, I mean, just like he says, it is what it is. Cody, how you doing?
Good. No, it's always a good sign to see two of your captains, your leaders. Obviously, a lot of people consider McCourty the quarterback of the defense, so I guess both quarterbacks on either side of the ball back in Gillette Stadium, training, staying hungry. Like you said, it's March 23rd.
We're how many months removed are we from the Super Bowl?
Not even 2, and they're already back, getting ready to go, trying to defend the throne.
Oh, there you go. And we read that and figured it'd be a good place to start. It's kind of a good opening statement, kind of brings your spirits up, especially if you're someone who looks at the front office and says, "What are you doing?" And sometimes you could be that person, and sometimes you'd be that person just to continue being that person. The front office could make as many good decisions as ever, but you could see one thing wrong with them and hate them, and so that's really for the pessimists out there who aren't too happy with the offseason. And with that, we can segue into what's happened so far this offseason. Since last week, what was the new guy we were just talking about? Cadet we just brought in.
Yeah, the Patriots bringing in Travaris Cadet, an undrafted free agent originally from the New Orleans Saints, entering his 4th season. Cadet is a pretty big running back, actually, in terms of NFL size. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. And from what I've been reading, he projects to be in the conversation to fill the hole left by Shane Vereen when he signed his contract with the New York Giants that we talked about last week. But I don't know a whole lot about him. He has some ability to be a specialist in terms of kick returning and punt returning. Obviously, punt returning is a job that's pretty much locked up, as the Patriots technically have the best punt returner in the history of the NFL.
In the history of the NFL, exactly.
But in kick returns, they still are missing. They haven't had a dynamic kick returner in a while.
They really haven't. They've really been. They really have just been known to just nail it or run for 20 yards. There hasn't been much in terms of that, as much as there has been with punt returns, and of course that's due to Aultman just taking the spotlight there. But I feel like having that kick return presence would give the Patriots an even bigger amount of threat on the special teams, because we've seen their special teams, especially this past year, become very, very strong. Especially, like we said, the punt return. It would be nice to see another kick returner that could really make an impact the same way Aultman does on punt returns. Whenever we watch Aultman do punt returns, I always kind of say to myself, he always makes the first guy miss. And for most of the time he does. Unfortunately, some of the times there's 3 guys there, and he may make one of them miss, but the other 2 are wrapped up around his ankles. But nonetheless, it would be nice to see that come to the kick return side. And I can't remember, you and I were talking about this beforehand. Does he consider himself the alternate to Shane Vereen, or is that like someone describing him?
No, I mean, he looks like he's definitely going to be in the conversation too. In terms of rushing, he doesn't have a lot of experience. I was just looking at the stats here, and the guy has 11 attempts.
Wow.
Rushing in his career.
This is his 4th year, and he's only had 11 attempts.
So, but in terms of receiving, last year he had 38 catches for 296 yards.
Okay.
I believe I saw a stat. I think he's averaging over like 6 yards after catch on average.
That's all I needed to know, because it already sounds like Ridley to me. Or not Ridley, Vereen. Sorry, I was reading my notes and Ridley's name popped out at me. Vereen was that kind of running back. Not really a threat from the backfield in terms of picking the ball up and running with it, but as being a target from out of the backfield that no one really expects, and then being able to be very shifty on his feet, get around a couple defenders, make some big catches in key situations. It gives Brady another comfortable target to try and hit. And that's why I liked Vereen. I liked his utility. I thought he was a great asset out of the backfield. Whether or not he was running it, I thought he was one of the better receiving running backs we've seen on the Patriots in quite some time. So looking at this guy's stats, I have no issue bringing him in. And you know how much I'm a Vereen guy, but it's mostly because of his utility and his play style, and I feel like that's the type of play style this guy's going to offer. I'm actually kind of excited to see this guy come in.
Yeah, no, I think he'll be. If he can pick up the offense, that's the main issue that I always have with offensive players coming into the Patriots system is a lot of them don't pick up the offense. But the fact remains that when Tom Brady and Josh McDaniels have been here for so long, every year they just add more and more to the book, and God knows how many plays that they have, and Brady just has them stored in his head. So when he calls out a play, he expects everyone to know it. And it could be a play that they ran,
3 years ago.
Not even that. They could have ran against the Oakland Raiders in 2001 in the snow game, the tuck rule.
I was just about to say the tuck rule.
Yeah,
game.
I mean, he's been here forever pretty much. So, I don't blame him for that because obviously if the plays work, then, they're always good to bring back around again. But, I mean, I'm not going to say Cadet will fill in perfectly for Shane Vereen. Obviously, Vereen had a pretty good year last year. He played all 16 games. That was always Vereen's major question mark was durability. But the thing about Vereen that I'm all right with letting him go is he never really popped to me like he should have. I never saw him go out there and, I don't want to say win a game by himself, but, put that performance where you look at that and you go, wow, without Shane Vereen, they lose that game. There were a couple, arguably you could put Super Bowl 49 in there, which, he had a great Super Bowl. I think he had 11 or 12 catches. Yards-wise, he didn't have many. He was just kind of that check down for Brady. And then I look at the beginning of the 2013 season in Buffalo. He had a great game, but ended up hurting his wrist and had that lingering issue for the rest of the year, was never quite the same. So, Shane Vereen was, he was a good player here. I think the Patriots did the right thing in letting him walk. He got paid a good amount of money for a running back in New York with the Giants. More power to him. Yeah,
no, I don't think he was worth the Patriots paying him that much money, but I feel like he was very, at least consistent looking at his stats. He didn't put up massive numbers, but they were only, around each other. Of course, his first season only put up 57, but then you look 251, 208, and then this past year, 2014, put up 391. And then even more so in the receiving category, he got 427 and 447 respectively in 2013 and 2014. So I don't look at someone who's this is not the type of player I look to be explosive. I look for him to be consistent, and that's exactly what he gave us. When you get Shane Vereen in the backfield and you set him out on a route, you know exactly what you're going to get from him, and you know what you're going to get from him in terms of stats for a season. That being said, if we can get kind of like a little brother to that, like the new and, well, I say new and improved, not really improved, just like a newer, younger player who's looking to grow and has the same play style as Vereen, and we can get him on more of a discount. Why not?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about the money it took to get Cadet. It wasn't nearly as much as Vereen, obviously, I can tell you that.
And the only real issue I had with letting Vereen go was that consistency issue, and then in terms of me being the New England fan that I am, just hating to see someone I really, really liked going to a team that I really, really disliked, like the Giants, and seeing Shane Vereen go to quote unquote the dark side.
Yeah,
but I mean, more power to him. I think he'll do decently in New York, which kind of makes me cringe a little bit. But I don't know. I just like him as a person, and I hate to see him go to the dark side.
No, definitely. But I think that Cadet and another name to watch out for, James White. He was a 4th round pick for the Patriots. He had a pretty good training camp, and then he kind of faded off in preseason games, but now he's had a whole year to get the system, understand the offense, know where he needs to be, knows what his job is, do your job. So I have high hopes for James White. He looks like he can run the ball pretty well, run between the tackles that is better than Shane Vereen. I'm not saying he's quite a Stephen Ridley or LeGarrette Blount, or even a Jonas Gray for that matter, but the fact that if you can have your receiving back be more of a balanced threat in terms of keeping the defense on their toes. Is this guy going to flank out and catch a ball in the flat, or is he going to run it up the middle? The versatility of the players is what's so key, and that's what makes the offense so well for the New England Patriots, that they have so many guys that do so many different things.
Transitioning, you mentioned a name that we still don't know if he's coming back yet. You mentioned Stephen Ridley. Missed most of last season with an injury, but like we've been saying, Cody, when we saw we didn't get to see much of what we got from Ridley this year, but it was good while it lasted. And he's been, you talk about consistent running. He's been one of the best and consistent runners in the last couple of years for the Patriots. And we're not really sure if he's coming back. I have no idea where he's even contesting with right now in terms of who wants to throw money at his face and whether or not he's going to accept it.
No, yeah, I haven't really heard him rumored to many teams. I think a lot of them, they need to wait till he passes a physical. I'm not quite sure if he's there yet in his
because
rehab.
Coming off of the injury and whatnot, he is running now, right?
Yeah, he is running. I've seen videos of him doing agility drills, running drills. He does look good moving around. He doesn't look like he's being timid. And granted, this is all without contact, so obviously you throw contact into the mix, all bets are off. But Ridley was a guy who really you saw develop as a player over the past couple of years in the New England Patriots system. Obviously, in 2012, he had that great breakout year, over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. You really thought, is this kid going to be like Corey Dillon? Is he the next running back in, the next great running back for the Patriots? But then in 2013, we saw, the fumbles become more of an issue. And, a lot of people had concerns about that. But then in 2014, 6 games, 94 attempts, he didn't have any fumbles. Granted, he wasn't running the ball quite as much.
I was just about to say, yeah.
But when you use that running back by committee type role where, especially when they brought LeGarrette Blount in last year, where, you don't have all the pressure on Ridley, so you can keep his legs fresh, you can keep his arms fresh for holding onto the ball. I really liked that combo of Blount and Ridley. It was kind of that thunder and lightning. Ridley was a little bit faster, could, break off a big play, but Blount would just, run it up the middle and just, hit you in the mouth. So I thought they were a good combo. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing online is that it looks like Stephen Ridley is looking for a 1-year type of prove-it deal where he can go somewhere for cheap, 1 year, maximize his value, probably, do his best to get up over 1,000 yards, maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns, maybe even get up into double digits. And my gut says that's not going to be New England. I'm not sure what the money is going to be. I would assume he would take less to go somewhere, like I said, where he can play more. And we see the Patriots now, they're, trending more of the, we're going to run whoever has the hot hand. We're not going to stick with Ridley on a day where he's cold because, well, we'll go put LeGarrette Blount in there.
Because we've got enough running backs to they're like the guy with the meme of the guy with the limes, except instead of limes it's running backs, and he's like, why can't I hold all these running backs? Literally the Patriots right now.
No, yeah, and that's the way to do it though, because we see injuries in the NFL, so much now. When you rely on one player, there's only a few teams in the NFL that really do have that, number one running back where they run him into the ground pretty much over the course of the season. And the Patriots, they don't do that. They really don't. I think it goes back to probably Corey Dillon is the last one that I can think of that was the real, true bell cow type back. And since then, obviously, like I said, in 2012, Ridley had great stats. But, it wasn't just him that year. Obviously, they used Vereen that year too. So, they do like being able to mix it up. They like being able to put different guys in, keeping legs fresh, so on and so on. But I can't. If that's what he's really looking for, I can't imagine the Patriots are going to sign him.
I was going to say, so do you think it's more likely that he's going to try and sign somewhere else or that he re-signs?
I think he's gone. I really do. Unless if nobody wants to take a risk on him, and if he says,
I think I think he'd be a pretty solid deal.
No, I think so too. And, honestly, a team that I look at that I would call up Stephen Ridley, I look at the Dallas Cowboys. They have a great offensive line. They just signed Darren McFadden. But if you could bring in a guy like Stephen Ridley, an experienced back, maybe start him, and that offensive line is absolutely phenomenal. DeMarco Murray should give 3/4 of his paycheck that he just got with the Eagles to that offensive line because they made DeMarco Murray into what he was this year, which was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. But no, I really don't see Ridley staying. I hope he does. If he decides to stay, that'll be fantastic. I think he'd be a great addition. Like I said, I like his, mixture of, being able to break tackles while also being able to break off a big play. Has the speed. Plus, he has one of the coolest touchdown celebrations in the league. I love that when he draws the door and kicks it through.
My goodness! Is Blunt? Do we know if Blunt's staying?
He is. Yes, he's on contract for another year, so he will be a free agent after this coming season.
Good. I like Blunt. I really do. I really like him a lot.
Yeah, I like
everything. His running style. The fact that he just, I feel like he's one of those kind of role players in the team that just loves the system, loves when he gets his shot. Every time he scores a touchdown, goes and poses, takes his selfie with the musket men. Love it. Love everything about Blunt.
I like the guy a lot too. He's a great fit. Him and Belichick have like this love for each other. It's so funny to see them, hugging on the sideline all the time.
Kind of like Belichick and Aultman after the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So, but no, Blount's a great player. If I had to pick one thing with him, just that sometimes he's so slow to get through the line. He's so dynamic when he gets to the
he's like
second
come
level.
on now. He's like a semi.
No,
he's got to rev up the first 5 gears before he gets going.
If he could just, I don't know, maybe do some agility drills more this offseason, but if he could hit that second level just a little bit faster, man, because when he hits the second level, even linebackers, defensive backs, they really don't want to bring him down. I mean, you see the damage he does once he gets past that initial wave of defensive linemen and even a middle linebacker.
Something we talked about last week that has come to fruition now was the signing of Johnson, the wide receiver who we were trying to get, Stevie Johnson, signed with the Chargers, yes?
Yeah, San Diego Chargers signed him. I believe it was a 3-year deal. He gets about $3.5 million per season.
And you were kind of pulling for him coming to New England a little bit, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. When he signed in San Diego, I wasn't surprised because he had a visit there as well. But when I saw the contract, I wasn't shocked at all because if he would have signed in New England for that same amount of money, he would have been making more than Brandon LaFell. And I really don't picture him playing more than Brandon LaFell in this offense.
No, Brandon LaFell has been in the offense for a little bit now, knows it a lot better than someone who's just coming in. And honestly, I'm not too bent out of shape about this. Looking at off-season things, obviously, my priorities, what I think they should be going for this year. Of course, defense, mostly defense, especially since you let the best cornerback in the league go to your rival. But other than that, I really haven't been focused on getting too much offense. I like the pieces we've gotten. Cadet's good. What's the tight end we just got? Scott Chandler. Love that pickup. But I don't feel like we need another. We don't need another wide receiver. It'd be cool to get another one, but I mean, we've got a pretty nice receiving core as we saw this year.
Yeah, you don't need to extend yourself for another wide receiver. I would like to see some more competition for that fourth wide receiver spot. Right now, I think if they had to pick, it'd be a competition between, we talked about him last week, Brandon Gibson, Kevin Dorsey, and then, probably the two in-house favorites for that role being Aaron Dobson and Brian Timms. Dwayne Bowe was another name floating around there, got cut by the Kansas City Chiefs. He ends up signing in Cleveland. Dwayne Bowe, pretty good player, big body, red zone threat. Would have liked to see him come here on cheap money, but obviously he's off the market now. And Michael Crabtree is another name I would keep an eye on. I think someone will overpay him for what he is now. He was in Miami last time I knew of. If he wants to take money and get on a 1-year prove-it deal, veteran minimum maybe, I could see the Patriots bringing him in. He's a pretty good route runner. He's a big-bodied receiver, but he isn't just a deep threat or a burner. He runs good routes. He runs those short to intermediate routes as well, which is how the Patriots offense runs so well, really. But I'm not sure if they're going to bring another wide receiver in terms of free agency. I do think that wide receiver is a need in this draft. I don't think they need to go early, but I think we'll get to some more draft talk later. We can talk about it then.
Segueing back into things that we talked about last week that we didn't really have time to, as we were wrapping up the show last week, Vince Wilfork announced right then and there that he was going to become a Houston Texan. Left a note on his Twitter, breaking the story himself. I always love when players do that. If you knew me last summer, you would have known that I salivated at the idea of LeBron James breaking his own going back to Cleveland through Sports Illustrated over doing an ESPN special
over the 4-lettered network,
and then watching sitting there cackling in my living room chair as I watched ESPN like kind of fumble all over themselves trying to make sense of the situation. But that's a side note. I like seeing players do that. Wilfork took his announcement into his own hands, and then for the next week, a little bit less than a week, it's sort of died down now. Just the absolute love fest between all these Patriots and former Patriots who have played with Vince Wilfork before, and I really think seeing all of this response to him leaving and all of this response to him as just a player and a person speaks volumes to the type of player and a type of person that he is. He has been one of my favorite Patriots, if not top 5 favorite Patriot in my lifetime of watching. I've watched the Patriots since I was old enough to understand football, and I always remember the first time I realized the type of person Wilfork was. I'm like, this guy's huge, but he's also fast.
No,
that's awesome.
No, yeah, he was obviously a great player. His story this year was, really quite amazing. The fact that he came back and performed at the level he did after tearing his ACL early in last season. A guy that's 335, 340 pounds, being able to come back after, on a torn ACL like that. I think he's going to be 32, 33. He's getting and be an older guy. It was pretty amazing, actually. And, he's effective all season. He played a lot of snaps. And obviously, I was very happy to see him go out with a Super Bowl. I kind of had a feeling that he was going to be one of the guys that they were going to let go. But hey, like Wilfork did say, I won a Super Bowl in my first season here, and I won one in my last season here. That's a good way to bookend his career here.
Absolutely, and he had one heck of a career in New England.
Another thing to bring up, too, is the fact that Bill Belichick actually was quoted saying Vince Wilfork is the best defensive lineman I have ever coached, which, coming from a guy like Bill Belichick, obviously, we're two pretty big Patriot fans. Obviously, we think that he's the greatest coach in the history of the league. But, anyone will tell you that Belichick is up there in terms of coaches in the history of football. And the fact that he has been in this league for 40 years and he drops a statement like that is, quite the tale to tell about a player like Vince Wilfork.
And this is one of the situations where we haven't seen this in a while. I always love to see it when a player who's played for a team for so long is able to leave under really, really good circumstances and leaving no backlash. The entire fan base is rooting for him in his new position. We haven't seen that in quite some time, and it's really good to see. It just really tells you what kind of player Wilfork was, both on and off the field. He had such a positive impact on people's lives, and I can't blame any fan for hating to see him go. But the fact is, he's doing what's best for him and his family. We talk a lot about that when players usually move for more money or different things. It's usually to kind of like better their own personal lives and better their family. And I mean, I'm no slouch to New England. I've lived here all my life. But if I had a chance to move to Houston, Texas for the latter majority of my career or the latter half of my career, I mean, I'd take it. I got family out there. It's a nice place.
No, yeah.
Nice and warm. Too many fire ants, though.
I think it's a good fit for Vince, like we were talking last week. Familiarity with the personnel down there. You have Billy O'Brien, Romeo Crennel, Mike Vrabel, the list goes on and on. And, he gets to go play with J.J. Watt, Davian Clowney, Brian Cushing. They're going to be a pretty mean front seven, but the main thing I think why Patriots fans are kind of wishing him well is because they don't see the Houston Texans really as a threat in the AFC. That's the end of the story.
Well, I mean, yeah, if he had gone to the Jets, you would have seen a full firestorm. That's why people were upset with Revis.
Yeah, or even the Ravens or the Colts. Honestly, those are two teams that I really thought were likely to land him.
Out of those three, though, I'd probably be least upset about the Colts. Mostly because I don't see them as a massive threat, and I don't see them as a massive rival. I saw the Patriots-Colts rivalry as a Brady Manning rivalry. I combined their names. And I saw that continue when Manning went to Denver. I don't really see that Patriots-Colts rivalry I see it more of Andrew Luck trying to prove himself against the greatest quarterback of all time. And that's all I have to say on that. I would have been fine with Vince going to the Colts. I'm happy he's going to Houston. I wish him well. I think he's going to do really well on that front seven. It's going to be very scary for anyone to face that. And I seriously think the Texans have a shot in the next couple of years. I was saying this with or without Vince. I think the Texans are quietly like getting themselves, groomed for the playoffs, and I think it's not too much longer now.
No, I think they'll be a playoff contender, in terms of maybe making the tournament, but they're still missing the most important position in any sport, in any major sport, in the quarterback. They still don't have a quarterback. They're bringing in Ryan Mallett. They got Brian Hoyer now. But, we'll see what happens. Stranger things have happened. You've seen teams win with, having a game manager type style quarterback, but you got to have a really good defense for that. But, hey, Houston looks like they're going to have a good defense. And, I think all Patriots fans can agree we're going to be cheering for Patriots South this year.
Now that free agency is starting to die down a little bit, it kind of helps people to look more towards the draft. You're kind of a draft junkie, Cody. Do you have like an exact date? How many more? Do you have the countdown going on your computer? How many days till the draft?
I actually don't have the countdown. It's the first weekend in May. Actually, it's pretty sad. I don't know the date yet.
It's pretty close. It's almost April.
Sad. Yeah, no, it's coming right up. Obviously, last year they tried it. They moved it back a little bit, but Thursday, April 30th.
Wow.
Through Saturday, May 2nd.
Pretty sure that's capstone night for me.
Yeah, it's right before graduation. Because I remember last year, for pre-graduation festivities, I was watching the draft, and it might have made a certain significant other for myself a little angry because I was watching the draft instead of attending to pre-graduation festivities.
Typical Cody.
Yeah, typical. But
typical Cody. I remember the draft last year because I was getting ready to move. I'm pretty sure I was getting ready to move out of my apartment, or moving out of Hart rather, and moving into my apartment for the summer. That was pretty fun. Not fun. I'm being sarcastic. It wasn't fun. But the draft is always a fun time. I usually don't watch the draft in terms of trying to figure out what's going to be the best for the Patriots, considering usually we don't do anything in the offseason. I mean, we draft good guys that end up coming to fruition in a couple of years. But really the draft for me is really just watching and seeing where Johnny Manziel is going to end up and where he's going to start screwing up, or who's going to be taken number one overall and disappointing that entire fan base, because I'm a pessimist like that. But really, now that I've matured in my viewing of the NFL draft, in my 4 years of being a sports analyst in my undergrad career, I kind of have, like a pecking order, like a list of things I want. Like it's more like kind of like a wish list of what I want the Patriots to do. And this is what it contains: defensive backs and offensive linemen, please. The end. I really don't care about offense in the draft right now. We have so much depth in wide receiver, in tight end. Heck, now even with Garoppolo, we've got that kind of young buck who might take over for Brady in the future, who Brady's going to be training up, have him under his wing for his entire career so far. And, yeah, I feel like offense is in a really good place right now other than offensive line. We don't need more weapons. We need protection. Brady needs his time to find those weapons. And in terms of defensive back, speaks for itself when you let Revis go and re-sign McCourty. Again, not to say that McCourty's bad. McCourty is a very good defensive back. You just don't have Revis next to him. So those are my two biggest wish lists in the draft this year.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that statement. I'll throw a third one in there as well. Whenever you lose a guy like Vince Wilfork, you have a big hole to fill, both theoretically and physically. So, I really do think that defensive tackle is a huge area of need. There's plenty of guys coming back that are solid at what they do, but the fact remains you still need that kind of go-to guy, that, ringleader for the defensive line. And I look at guys like Silver Salinga, I look at Alan Branch, I look at Chris Jones, even Dominic Easley. None of those guys really are that Vince Wilfork type of unique player where they can eat blocks, but yet, they're fleet of foot and can still put pressure on the quarterback. Not to say Vince was, a Ndamukong Suh type pass rusher in the middle, but he still created opportunities for the defensive ends to get sacks. He would flush quarterbacks out of the pocket. So I think that defensive tackle is a huge area of need as well, but I'll fully echo you. Defensive tackle, offensive guard, and cornerback. Those are the three.
Well, luckily for you, we won't reveal your big board quite yet. We might save that for another date, especially when we get closer to the draft and when you have time to refine it. But I think yours is pretty decent right now. I want to see how it holds up against what they actually do. A mock draft that just came out this afternoon, I'm looking at it on Nesson, giving the first pick for the Patriots in the first round, 32nd overall, to Jordan Phillips, a defensive tackle from Oklahoma. So there already goes and fits one of our wish list specifications. And then the next two in the mock draft. So this is what I'm really hoping this comes to fruition, because the first three picks in this mock draft are exactly what we want. There's a defensive tackle. There's a cornerback from Connecticut, Byron Jones, who you said broke a record or something?
Yeah, he broke the record for the longest broad jump, which, fun fact, was held by Jamie Collins. So Jamie Collins, when he came out of the draft, looked like this, unheralded type of, raw prospect. And obviously you see what Bill Belichick has taken him and done with him. So, you look at a guy like Byron Jones who breaks that record, an athletic phenom. And, you think, wow, maybe, if Bill can get this guy, he can really turn him into something as well.
So you got your defensive tackle. You've got your cornerback. That's 32nd and 64th pick. 96th pick is the third pick the Patriots get. Josu Matthias. Am I saying that right? Matthias? A guard from Florida State. So already, those three positions that you and I agree on that the Patriots need the most are already in their mock draft at 1, 2, and 3. And I think if that's the mindset the Patriots are going to have going in, whether or not they're going to, I don't care where or when they move. I don't care if they go up. I don't care if they go down. So long as they get these positions this early, it shows me that their priorities are in the right spot. And I feel like their priorities will be in the right spot. This is a very smart team. Look, you look at the decisions they've made in the draft the last couple of years have not, fallen through at all. They've been kind of decent. And I really think that, especially coming off of this Super Bowl, where a lot of people were like, oh, okay, they're just going to lie down and die, let all these big-name players go because they've gotten their Super Bowl. The fans will be happy for 5 years. No, they know what they need to win again, and they want Brady to get his fifth. They know that he can, and that I feel like this is going to be the starting place, is starting to rebuild in those key positions, because you can get away with that. You're not really missing a huge chunk. You're still a decent team. You can snag players here and there and end up putting the pieces together rather than blowing everything on the number one pick in the draft, which will end up falling by the wayside.
Yeah, no, and I think next week we'll start to preview different draft positions, probably defensive tackle and offensive guard, since those are obviously the two biggest needs, cornerback as well, but, we'll
those are our big three, yes.
Right, we'll pick some, needs to start going into, but, really quickly, out of those three picks, I like Jordan Phillips the most there at pick 32 in the first round. He's a big boy, 6'5", 329. What it looks like is there's a lot of internal discussion about him in terms of the Patriots camp. He's a guy that looks like he should be there, available at pick number 32. You never know with these type of things because, I remember reading mock drafts all last year saying Johnny Manziel was the best quarterback in the draft, blah, blah. He's going to go top 10 easy, and Manziel nearly falls out of round one. Teddy Bridgewater pretty much did fall out of round one.
I think that comes down to the fact that the media started believing their own hype about Johnny Manziel. He was a great college quarterback, no doubt about that. And I personally, when I saw him drop to as far down as he went, I was surprised at first, and then when I really thought about it, I'm like, no, they overhyped him. That's what's going to happen. But nonetheless, that is a side note, and I've already mentioned many times in this podcast how I feel about the draft.
No, so, I really like, if Jordan Phillips is available at 32, that'd be a good pick for me. I'll talk about the other two picks too right there. Byron Jones, I'm a fan of his. I think that he's an interesting prospect. I don't know if he's worth the reach in round 2. There very well could be a team that will take him in round 2, but when you look at the cornerback position with the Patriots, they don't really have a lot of time and patience at that spot right now. And
yeah, no, they kind of need a quick fix.
You need a guy that can get in the game now, and Byron Jones may develop to be some phenomenal cornerback. But right now, you need a guy who can play, average, if not a little bit above average corner. I don't want to reveal too many names, but I'll tell you there's a kid in Wake Forest, Kevin Johnson, who his upside isn't quite as much as a guy like Byron Jones. He doesn't have the measurables, but in terms of technique and fundamentals and plug and play, his rookie season, he looks more like a pick. If he's available in round 2, I would be very, very happy if the Patriots could get him there. And Josie, I say his name wrong all the time.
Josu Matthias?
There you go. Okay, yeah. So he's an offensive guard out of Florida State. Obviously, we saw what Florida State produces in terms of offensive linemen. Brian Stork was absolutely phenomenal his rookie season. When he came into that center position, we saw that offensive line really start to mold together and play well. He's, a big, strong kid. And retired offensive line coach Dante Scarnecchia loves Florida State offensive linemen.
And, to be honest, I do too. Being a Florida State fan and also seeing... you can give flack to any of their players you want, but the reason that they're getting the flack is because they're so famous, and the reason that they're so famous is because they have that great pocket protection. Of course, talking about players like Jameis Winston has, a lot of time in the pocket to really develop. Granted, you could argue that, the only reason he had that amount of time in the pocket was, the offensive line didn't have quite of a challenge in their conference, because they were playing in a weak conference, yada, 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 all the excuses. I don't care. A good offensive line is a good offensive line no matter what league you're playing in. And Stork is the greatest example, taken exactly from that offensive line. And I feel like if they got Matthias and they put him, right next to Stork like he used to be, it's going to be just like old times.
Yeah, no, that's actually, again, we won't go too far, but he's actually, Matthias is the 3rd ranked Florida State offensive lineman on my big board for the Patriots, actually. So that kind of goes to show you what quality of player they're putting out, and still the fact that the 3rd guy on Florida State coming into this draft on that offensive line is probably going to go in the 3rd round. So that speaks to volumes, even what the other 2 are capable of. One of them being, I don't know if he'll even be available at pick 32. So Florida State, good pro-ready system. Dante Scarnecchia loves those guys.
Yep.
If they want to bring in as many Florida State offensive linemen, that's good with me.
I'm absolutely fine with that. The offensive line was something, especially early in this past season, which again, kind of, hindsight's 2020. But back in the first couple of weeks, you and I were freaking out about this offensive line. They started to get a little better. I'm still not as comfortable as I could be with those, but I'm fine with loading it up with Florida State guys on the offensive line. And I guess I kind of want to switch now into you kind of jogged something in my head that made me seem like, all right, so you look at Matthias, and he's the 3rd best Florida State offensive lineman going in. What do you think the Patriots should do in the first round? Do you think they should go for the defensive tackle as their highest priority? Should they use that earlier pick to maybe get one of those other 2 better players from Florida State? Or should they stay how they are and see where the players land? And if they can grab someone at that pick, do it. If they can grab Matthias at that pick, grab him at that pick. I don't know. I don't know the strategy, because as it stands right now, they would be taking, in this mock draft, they would be taking Jordan Phillips over these 2 guys that are better than Matthias, if they are available at pick 32.
Yeah, they very well could. The number 1 ranked Florida State offensive lineman that I have is Cameron Irving. He can play any of the 3 interior offensive line positions. Big kid. I think he's 6'6". He's very, very solid player. I'm not sure if he's going to be available at 32, but my 2nd ranked one was Trey Jackson. He's closer to Matthias, but I don't really know I don't know where they're thinking, where their priorities are, really, because, it's all about value for them. They're not going to take an offensive guard in round 1 because they need an offensive guard if they can get, a more dominant player at that spot. So, the way they set their team up is they don't need to draft holes per se. They aren't pigeonholed into selecting one position at any one round per se. They have a couple positions of need, obviously defensive tackle, cornerback, offensive guard. And what I think they'll do is, they'll draft the best available player at that spot. So at pick number 32, if it comes down to Jordan Phillips or Cameron Irving, that's a good spot to be in, because then they can pick which one they want.
Exactly, yeah.
But I I really can't see them trading up in this draft in terms of moving around. If Cameron Irving is sitting there at, pick 25, I can't see them moving up to go get him and spending that extra draft capital if they're going to think, all right, Jordan Phillips he's going to be there at 32, and then we can go get, either Jackson or Mateus later in the draft because, that they very rarely do value players that much to move a lot to go get them, which is why 2012 was such a crazy experience as a fan when they traded up to go get Chandler Jones and then traded back into the first round to draft Dante Hightower. I would love to see them do that again purely on the fact that there's so few roster spots to be had on this team. I don't really want them to draft 8, 9 guys. I don't want them to trade down and get all these picks per se. I would rather see them, put some of those together and then, maybe you get 4 or 5 players who are, really can contribute in year one, or maybe not even in year one, but, will be solid contributors down the line. I'm not saying they're going to be all pros, but, get that core of players and move forward.
Day in, day out, every Sunday, they're going to be there and they're going to make some sort of an impact, whether or not it's on the stat sheet or whether or not they get national attention for it. They're going to go in every Sunday or Monday night and do their job. And you know that is what the Patriots are going to draft.
Exactly.
And I think the Patriots are in a great position here, especially if they do get Jordan Phillips at that 32nd pick, because then you could think about it this way. Do you want to completely rebuild the defense, and then if there's a better guard available at the 64th pick, do you take him over Jones? And then since you already have that new defensive tackle who's probably going to make an impact, you want to focus on that pass rush first kind of defense, kind of take some pressure off of the defensive backs? Or do you want to completely redo it and then get Byron Jones and then hope for Mateus in the 3rd round? And I really feel like I don't want to say there's no wrong answer, but I don't feel like there is one here.
You're exactly right, because obviously, there's value in the draft wherever you are, honestly. And even in the undrafted free agents, the guys that don't get drafted, the Patriots will have their eye on players of, all different calibers that are going to go in all different rounds and signed at different times. They are in contact with guys that are going to be high first-round picks. They're in contact with guys that are going to be signed 3 and 4 days after the draft because they won't be drafted. That's just how they do it. They're so thorough with their, research on these kids that they know what they want, and, depending on if a certain guy falls, they'll go up and trade for him. I personally, like I said, I don't think there's a player in this draft that will fall to a realistic spot in the first round to trade up for. If I would say one guy, if there's going to be one guy that would fall, I don't think he will, but Danny Shelton would be the name that I look for. Defensive tackle out of Washington. He's really good, I guess. I don't even know how to describe him per se, but in terms of he's big enough to eat blocks and he can get in the backfield and get at the quarterback. And that's huge to have a guy that can disrupt from the middle of the defensive line.
He's basically your sleeper pick at defensive tackle, kind of.
He's not a sleeper because I really think that he will be a borderline top 10 pick. So, but him and even I look at a guy like Malcolm Brown out of Texas, 2 defensive tackles, and that just goes to show. I think that the only position you trade up for here is defensive tackle because I don't think there's a cornerback. And I don't think there's really an offensive guard that will fall to that mid-first round, spot where the Patriots might say, "All right, let's package our 3rd round pick this year, and maybe this year's first, and maybe 2 years from now is 4th to go up and get that guy." I don't think anyone's going to fall to that realistic measure.
Wheeling and dealing to get that player.
Yeah, no, it's not like I'm saying the Patriots are going to trade out and get Leonard Williams, that big defensive tackle out of USC.
Your Massachusetts just came out.
He's like Richard Seymour back in the day.
You're not even from Massachusetts, and your Massachusetts just came out.
Yeah, that's just like the obnoxious callers I hear on on Boston-based sports radio.
I had another point to make here. It was that. So what is that really? You don't see any player that the Patriots would wheel and deal for to kind of go up and get just out of nowhere. Not even like a I don't know.
I really don't know.
You just kind of want them to play it safe?
I don't know. I mean, it's not even really playing it safe because I think if we learned anything with the Patriots draft is who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? Nobody, the only guys that know pretty much are Belichick and Caserio. That's it. I don't even think Kraft knows.
Kraft doesn't even know. Kraft is just there to call the player afterwards, be like, "Hey, welcome to our organization. Yeah. I really like what you're going to bring to the team."
Exactly. So, But if Belichick thinks that there's a guy that he wants and he can trade up for, he'll do it because he calls the shots. If Belichick says, all right, at 32, there's no one I really want, I'm going to trade back, then he'll trade back. What I would do in this draft, if I was Bill Belichick, honestly, depending on who falls, I would trade out of the first and I would try to get like 3 second-round picks. This is the draft to do that because I think there's only a few players at the very top of the draft that really set themselves apart. You know, you look at the 2 quarterbacks, Winston, Mariota, Leonard Williams. I just mentioned him. He's a tremendous defensive lineman out of USC, drawing comparisons to Richard Seymour. I don't need to say any more to another Patriots fan. After that, you know, Dante Fowler, an edge rusher out of Florida, Amari Cooper, a wide receiver, Kevin Johnson, another wide receiver. After that, there is a pretty big drop-off, and a guy that you could get at 32, you might be able to get a similar guy at, 46. I look at, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Jordan Phillips, but if they can trade out of round 1, get an extra second rounder, and get a guy like Eddie Goldman, a defensive tackle out of where? Where do you think he's from?
I'm going to say, since you're looking at me like that, Florida State?
Florida State University. If you can do that, then I would do that because then you can just add a couple of big pieces. And, I even say trading down. I would even think that's kind of trading up. If they can get 3 second-round picks, that's building that type of core that I want them to do. If they can get, a guy like Eddie Goldman, a solid defensive tackle, can start year 1. You go out, maybe you get Trey Jackson, maybe Cam Irving falls. AJ Cann, he's another guard out of University of South Carolina. He's pretty solid. And then maybe if you can get a defensive back. I mentioned Kevin Johnson. I don't know if he is going to be a first-round pick, but I'll tell you what. If they end up with an Eddie Goldman, a Kevin Johnson, and AJ Cann all in the second round, you heard it here first, and I'll be very, very happy because that addresses all 3 areas of need. All 3 of those guys can be starters in year 1, and they can make big impacts as rookies.
For our last serious topic, I figured we would transition into talking about a little bit about our university here. University of Maine's football program has been growing in national recognition in terms of drafting players of the NFL and signing players of the NFL undrafted. And we just had our pro day. What was it? Last Thursday?
Yeah, last Thursday.
And a couple players turned some heads from some scouts. A Patriots scout was there, so I guess we kind of we can tie that into Patriots talk a little bit and how we think. Well, I know especially you think that one of our UMaine Black Bears can make it onto the Patriots. Of course, we saw Matt Mulligan make it. I believe it was a year ago.
Yeah, last year he played for the Patriots.
Got a couple snaps in.
Yeah, he actually got a touchdown too. So it was pretty cool to see. But no, I think out of this group of potential NFL players that were Black Bears, I look at wide receiver Damarr Aultman as probably the best prospect to be signed by a team. I'm not sure if he'll be drafted. Actually, he very well might be. But the fact is, he put together quite a pro day. I think he had a 41-inch vertical. He was right around a 4.4 for his 40. I heard rumors of him potentially going sub 4.4, which is, a good number to be at as a wide receiver, especially in his type of role as a possession type guy. He isn't a pure burner, not a deep threat. He doesn't have the body size for it. He's 5'11". But, in terms of what the Patriots look for in wide receivers, he kind of fits the bill. He's kind of that, 5'11", 200 pounds, speedy, shifty, he's got good hands, runs good routes, and throw in the fact that he has special teams value. He was a kick returner here at Maine. He can sub in as a kick returner. All those things add up, and they're all good for Damarr Aultman to be potentially brought in to be a Patriot. Even if he only goes to camp. We saw last year they brought in Derek Johnson, who was a Black Bear wide receiver. So they do have connections here. They kind of have kept an eye on this program. Obviously the only scout at Pro Day was the Patriot scout. So
yeah, put Matt Mulligan to work over there in New England as well. Like to recruit the local New England guys. I think it was Aultman last year who in the playoff game, or either that or it was a late season game, had a kickoff return for a touchdown. I think it was him. Either way, he's been really good at kick returning. I feel like he does fit the build of a Patriots wide receiver. Brady would easily integrate him into his system, I think, if he were to join the Patriots. He's into those little, as Julian Edelman calls them, squirrely guys who can just, get open on nice routes and are very mobile. You mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Damarr before we started recording. You talk about, look at him with the quarterbacks he's had, and you get him with an NFL caliber quarterback. Like there are some plays where he's had to go out of his way to make a catch, and he can still make that catch and break a few tackles and make a huge play out of it. Imagine TB12 thrown to him.
Yeah, no, and I mean, even any NFL caliber quarterback, even, backups for these NFL teams.
Tim Tebow even? Throwing back to last week?
Yeah, okay. Well, no. But no, I mean, I'm not saying that every single time it was the quarterback's fault. It is what it is. But, when I was watching some of his, tape from some of his games, I just noticed that, he'd be running a route and then he'd have to stop and turn and catch the ball and then get his momentum going again. It wasn't like every single ball he was thrown his way, he was in stride. And a guy like Aultman, who does have the speed, he can break away from players. Obviously if he's running, a 4.38, a 4.39 40, he does have speed. And, add in the fact that he has a very good vertical, he can go up and he can get the ball, he very well could be a solid, at least camp body, and then, hopefully work his way onto an NFL team. I don't know if that team will be the Patriots. I would not be shocked if the Patriots brought him in for camp, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be cheering for him. I'd like to see him make it in the NFL. We were talking about it beforehand, but, look at the New York Giants. They took a kind of a New England local player just like Damarr. Victor Cruz was a very similar type player. Fast, shifty, has good hands, runs good routes. And he made it with the Giants, won a Super Bowl with them and, was considered, one of probably the better wide receivers in the league.
He's when you talk about best wide receivers in the league, and at least in the new millennium, let alone, he's definitely in contention. He's definitely in the talks. There's no doubt about it that he is quite the talented receiver. It'd be really cool to see another Black Bear go into the NFL. It's always nice to catch up and see where they go. I remember my freshman year, I think it was someone went to the Packers. Who was it?
Drawn
McMillan. Yep. I remember that because he was pretty sure he made front page of NFL Draft Talk like in April, my freshman year. And it was just so weird to open up Draft Talk and just see Drawn McMillan doing drills. And it's like, wow, he's made a name for himself. And he hasn't really made too much of a name for himself on the Packers since then.
No, I think he ended up getting cut, but still, the fact that, he was there and he did play. He played quite a bit.
He played a huge amount in his rookie season.
Yeah.
I remember that. So like we did last week, we want to end with kind of not necessarily a joke segment, but more of like a kind of an off topic. Like it doesn't have to completely do with the Patriots and or sports. This time it does. Photos, I say as a joke, leaked the other day of Tom Brady and his family on vacation. One of which my favorite would be him buried in the sand by his children with the caption, "Can someone please dig me out before training camp?" It just continues my love of a lot of the Patriots on social media. Players like Tom, players like Edelman, players like Wilfork have that great social media presence, and it really helps you. It really helps like the fans connect, and it makes them feel like they know their favorite players more. I love to see it. You brought it up beforehand. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a funny thing to bring up. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, no, even Chandler Jones actually is very good in terms of Twitter, Instagram, and I'm pretty sure he even Snapchats with fans. I think you can add him.
Yep. I'm pretty sure I saw a thread on the Patriots subreddit where he challenged a Snapchat friend to Madden and like actually played with him, and I follow him on Instagram. He's a pretty funny guy. He posts a lot of good stuff. No,
but you're exactly right. It is, social media, it gets bashed a lot of the time for, the negative things that go on with it. But, in reality, when it does work well, it works extremely well. And, it's great as fans to, really get inside and see these athletes in, kind of their personal lives, really, Yeah. You look at, seeing pictures of Brady, he, for being a, all-time great quarterback, Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer, dating a supermodel, at the end of the day, he likes going to the beach and hanging out with his family like most people do.
Yeah, I love watching. I love seeing everyone has this illusion that athletes and celebrities aren't people, and when you get to see the inside to their life, when you see Gisele Bündchen post a picture of her kids watching the game with her, or Christmas morning you'll see Tom and Gisele tagging each other in their pictures saying this is my best Christmas present, that cute kind of stuff, and then see people like Chandler Jones taking a selfie with Tyler Seguin being like, hey, remember when this guy was in Boston, or hanging out with Gronk man, I miss these guys. Or my favorite one, which was last offseason in about April, so a little bit around this time, Julian Edelman just tweets at Rob Gronkowski, hey, Gronk, what's up? Want to watch some Cops? Just out of nowhere. It really shows you the camaraderie that these guys have on and off the field. It's kind of an insight to why at the beginning of this season, when the team started to turn around after the whole everyone freak out, the Patriots suck now. After that, after the Cincinnati game and around that time, I was like, this team's going all the way. You see it on the field. You see their unity. You see it off the field. They've got that rallying cry of, the on to the next team, much like the Celtics had Ubuntu during their 2008 run. And I knew from that moment that it was going to happen because of that unity. And I think the locker room right now is in a good place. And I feel like social media has a huge part in that and a huge part in showing it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Obviously, we're always waiting for the next post, whether it's from Tom Brady on Facebook or, even Gronk on Twitter or Chandler Jones on Instagram. It's just, that's the way. Or even, hey, how about Linda Holiday, Bill Belichick's girlfriend? She's on Instagram all the time, too. It's kind of funny to see. I think she just put a picture of him actually on vacation. He's sitting in the water, with this cowboy hat on the phone, obviously talking to some guy about, a draft prospect or something, but it's priceless. It truly is.
I don't know, dude. My favorite's always going to be Smoothie Time with Julian Edelman.
Those are great.
Those
are great.
I love everything Edelman does on social media. I love everything about Edelman. We know that. I'm an Edelman fanboy. And that about wraps up the second episode of All Three Phases. Next week, you can catch us here on Monday. We'll have another episode up, and we're going to break down some draft positions, maybe defensive tackle, offensive guard, maybe even defensive backs if we get to it. And whatever else comes up in Patriots news within the next 7 days. I'm Brandon Polai.
And I'm Cody LaChance.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
New England, the Patriots and me. Rolling on to victory.
Let's just talk about needs. Let's talk about what do you want
Trust me.
your New England Patriots to draft, and then maybe we'll talk about strategy after we talk about needs first. Let's not talk about so much players, more like positions and types of players you like. Maybe draw NFL comparisons to type. I want a J.J. Watt. Oh, really?
I want a J.J. Watt.
Ooh.